I remember that Christmas Eve as if it had been branded in my chest with fire and frost at the same time. The street outside my small house was covered with those blinking lights that people hang with pride every year, as if they could light up the emptiness that hides behind so many smiles. From my window, I could see families arriving with laughter, the smell of roasted turkey floating through the cold air, and the faint sound of bells from the church down the hill. But inside my living room, the light didn't shine the same anymore. The tree was smaller that year. I'd set it up alone, as I'd done since my wife passed. The ornaments were the same old ones, some missing their hooks, others with faded paint, but I kept them because she had loved them. On top, the star leaned a little to the side, like a tired hope trying to stay upright. That night, I sat in silence, tying and untying the same old tie. It was red, slightly torn at the edge, the one my son had given me when he was 10. He had wrapped it himself, with newspaper and tape, his handwriting crooked but proud. He had said, "So you can wear it when you become the man I'll want to be one day." I never told him that I'd already worn that tie to every important moment of my life since job interviews, anniversaries, even her funeral. But that night, when the phone rang, something inside me trembled. His voice came through cheerful, full of background laughter. "Dad, are you ready for dinner? We're waiting for you." I smiled, even though my reflection didn't smile back. "Of course, son. I'll be there soon." What I didn't know was that this Christmas would not be like the others. That behind the glow of candles and the clinking of glasses, I would find a silence so sharp it could cut through my chest. That night, my son would give me a gift that I would never forget, not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. I still remember the way he looked at me when he handed it over, how the room went quiet for a second, how I tried to pretend that I didn't see the difference. Because right after giving me that simple box with a tie inside, he turned to his wife's father, smiled, and said, "And for you, sir, something a bit more special." The garage door opened, and the reflection of a brand new red Mustang filled the room with light. Laughter, applause, admiration. I stood there, holding the tie in my hands, my throat dry, my heart suddenly older than it had ever been. And that's when I realized the lights around me hadn't stopped shining. It was me who no longer could. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. From where are you listening to this story tonight? Because maybe, just maybe, you've also had a Christmas when the lights didn't shine the same. I arrived a little early that night. The streets were shining, but not because of the stars, it was the lights, the same artificial glow that people hang on their porches, pretending that everything is still beautiful, still bright. I parked my old pickup in front of my son's big house. The driveway was filled with cars I couldn't even name, and I stood there for a moment, adjusting my coat, breathing in the cold air, trying to find the courage to knock. When he opened the door, his smile was polite, not cold, not cruel, just polite. That's what hurt the most. He used to run into my arms every Christmas, used to beg me to lift him high enough to touch the angel on the top of the tree. Now, his hug lasted only 2 seconds, and his hand patted my back like a stranger thanking me for a favor. "Dad, you made it," he said, stepping aside. Behind him, the living room looked like a catalog. The smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the air, but there was something missing, maybe the laughter, maybe the warmth. His wife, Emily, smiled and handed me a glass of wine. I never liked wine, but I took it anyway, because sometimes kindness feels like survival. Dinner was served. Silver plates, folded napkins, candles everywhere. Everyone talked about trips, business, new houses. I listened, nodding quietly, afraid that if I spoke, my words would sound too old-fashioned, too small for that table. Then came the moment of the gifts. My heart started to beat faster, I don't even know why. Maybe because, deep inside, I still wanted to be seen by him the way he once looked at me, with pride, with love. He reached under the tree, picked up a small box wrapped in blue paper, and smiled at me. "Here you go, Dad." I opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper, as if the way I handled it would change what was inside. A tie. A simple tie. Plain gray, no tag, no sign of care. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "It's nice," I said softly. But before I could even look at him again, he grabbed a bigger box and called, "And this one is for you, sir." He handed it to Emily's father, a man with perfect hair and expensive shoes. Everyone watched as he opened the keys inside a brand new Mustang, red as fire. The whole room burst into applause, laughter, excitement. I clapped too. My hands were shaking, but I clapped. I looked at my son, his face shining with pride, and for a moment I wondered if he realized what he had just done. If he saw the way my heart folded in on itself, like paper being burned at the edges. Maybe he didn't mean to. Maybe it was just one of those things life teaches us too late, that the things we give say more than the things we say. Dinner went on. The Mustang was the only topic. Everyone wanted to see it, to touch it. I stayed behind, pretending to finish my drink. I heard the engine start outside, loud and full of life, while I sat in silence, my tie still resting on the table, untouched. Emily came to me for a moment, smiling kindly. "He really wanted to surprise him," she said, maybe trying to ease the tension. I nodded. "It's a beautiful car," I whispered. "I'm sure he deserves it." She placed her hand on my shoulder, maybe pity, maybe regret, and walked away. I stayed there, just listening to the echo of laughter fading as the door opened and closed. I looked at the tree, the gifts, the polished floor. I could see my reflection old, tired, misplaced. My eyes filled, not with anger, but with that quiet sadness that only time can bring. I wanted to go home, but I didn't want to ruin their night. So I sat down again, pretending to read the card that came with the tie. There was nothing written inside. Just a blank card. And as I sat there, I remembered another Christmas long ago, when he was little and I was still strong. We had no money then, but we had joy. He made me a paper tie, colored with crayons, and said, "One day I'll buy you a real one, Dad." And I told him, "I don't need one. I already have the best gift, you." The memory hit me hard. The sound of his laugh back then was louder than any engine could ever be. I felt something inside me tighten, not bitterness, just longing. Maybe I had been a good father once, or maybe I had failed somewhere along the road without noticing. When they came back inside, the night had already grown cold. He thanked everyone again, hugged his father-in-law, took pictures beside the car. Then he turned to me, smiled faintly, and said, "Did you like the tie, Dad?" I nodded. I did. "It's practical." He laughed softly. "Yeah, I figured you could use it." I smiled back, but deep down, I knew I'd never wear it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it had no meaning. That night, when I got home, I hung the tie beside the old red one he'd made as a boy. I looked at both for a long time. One made of paper, one of silk. One full of love, one full of silence. And for the first time, I realized that sometimes, the most painful distance isn't measured in miles, it's measured in years of unsaid words. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall slowly, and whispered to the dark, "Where did we lose each other, son?" But the night gave no answer. Only silence. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt colder than usual. The lights from the night before were still hanging outside, blinking lazily as if even they were tired of pretending. I made myself a cup of coffee, bitter, black, quiet, and sat by the window. The tie was still on the chair beside me, untouched, folded perfectly as if waiting for something it would never get, meaning. The house I lived in wasn't much, just a small wooden place built by my own hands back when my wife and I still dreamed of growing old together. Every nail, every crack on the floor, every faded wall carried her laughter. I could still see her there sometimes, humming while cooking, calling my name from the porch, brushing our boys' hair before school. Her absence was everywhere, but it was the kind of absence that became part of the air itself. You learn to live with it. You learn to talk to ghosts. That morning, I decided to clean up a bit. Not because it was messy, but because sometimes when the heart hurts too much, the hands need to stay busy. I swept the floor, dusted the pictures, straightened the couch. On the wall hung a frame of the three of us, Christmas Eve, many years ago. My wife's eyes were full of warmth, my son's small hands holding a toy truck I'd carved for him. I remembered how that night, he'd whispered, "Dad, when I grow up, I'll build you a big house." I'd laughed and said, "As long as it has your laughter inside, it'll be big enough." Now, his house was big. Big enough for cars that shine brighter than stars, big enough for guests who barely knew my name. But somehow, too small to fit me. Around noon, the phone rang. It was him. "Dad, sorry about last night," he said. My heart lifted for a second, but before I could reply, he continued, for keeping you so long. Emily's parents were excited, and I didn't realize it got late. I said it was fine. I always said it was fine. I told him I was proud, that he had done well, that I understood. And I did, in a way. Because maybe the distance between us wasn't built in a day. Maybe it started long ago, when I worked too many nights, missed too many dinners, thinking I was doing it for him. Fathers make that mistake, confusing sacrifice with presence. After the call, I walked to the shed behind the house. Dust floated in the air like memories too stubborn to leave. I found his old bike, still rusted, still leaning against the same wall where he'd left it before moving away. The tires were flat, but the bell still worked. The sound brought tears to my eyes, the same sound that once echoed down the dirt road when he came running home shouting, "Dad, look. No hands." That house, once so full of life, felt smaller now, not because the walls had shrunk, but because my world had. Everything that once mattered had slowly moved somewhere else. In the evening, I sat by the fireplace. The flames danced softly, their warmth barely touching me. I thought about visiting him again, maybe bringing something, cookies like his mother used to bake, or that old family photo he loved. But then I remembered the look in his eyes the night before, that polite kindness, the kind people reserve for strangers. Still, I couldn't help myself. I went to the old chest where I kept our family things and started rummaging through it. Inside, beneath yellowed newspapers and forgotten souvenirs, I found a small wooden box. Inside it, a folded piece of paper, a drawing of our house, done by him when he was a boy. On the back, written in his crooked letters, were the words, "Home is where Dad is." My breath caught. I sat down, holding that paper like something sacred. It was strange how children understand love better than adults. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what he once drew with so much heart. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked softly with the wind. Every corner whispered a memory. I thought about calling him again, telling him I missed him, telling him that the tie didn't matter, that maybe I was just tired and overthinking. But I didn't. Pride is a cruel companion. It keeps you company but takes away your peace. Then, around midnight, there was a knock on the door. My heart skipped. Who could it be at that hour? When I opened it, I froze. It was Emily, my daughter-in-law, standing in the cold, holding something wrapped in a paper bag. Her eyes looked tired, softer than usual. "I shouldn't be here," she said quietly, stepping inside. "But I wanted to bring you something." She handed me the bag. Inside was a box of cookies, the same recipe my wife used to make. "I found her old cookbook in the attic," she said. "He never talks about her much, but I know she meant the world to you both." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. She looked around the small house, her eyes scanning the pictures, the tree, the warmth that still lived in that space. "He misses her," she said softly. "But sometimes he doesn't know how to show it. He carries more of you than he admits." Then she left, quietly, leaving the smell of cinnamon and memory behind. When I closed the door, I sat at the table and opened the box. The cookies were a little burnt, uneven, just like my wife used to make them. I smiled through the tears. For a moment, it felt like Christmas again. And as I took the first bite, I looked around and thought maybe the house hadn't gotten smaller after all. Maybe it was just waiting for someone to come home. The next morning came gray and heavy, as if the sky itself carried the same weight I had in my chest. I didn't bother opening the curtains. The world outside didn't seem worth looking at. I spent hours just walking around the house without purpose, touching the old furniture, the framed photographs, the chipped edges of memories that refused to fade. Something in me kept circling back to the old chest in the attic, the dusty box where time hid the things we never quite had the courage to throw away. I don't know what drew me there, maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness. Maybe both. The wooden stairs creaked beneath my feet as I climbed. The air up there was thick with dust and silence, and when I opened the small window, the cold air hit my face, smelling of pine and distance. I lit a small lamp and began looking through the boxes. There were Christmas ornaments, my wife's old scarf, a tiny pair of shoes that once belonged to my son. I held them for a long time, feeling their smallness, remembering how once these shoes walked only toward me. Then I found it, a small tin box I hadn't seen in years. It was hidden under a blanket, like something the heart tries to forget but never truly can. I opened it. Inside were letters, a dozen maybe folded carefully, some yellowed, others stained with what could have been coffee or maybe tears. The handwriting was mine. Each envelope had the same name, to my son. None had ever been sent. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. The date said December 26, 2002. It was the year he left for college. I began to read. "Son, I know you won't read this, but tonight the house feels emptier than ever. Your mother set a place for you at dinner even though she knew you wouldn't come. She tried to hide her sadness, but I saw it in her eyes. I hope where you are feels like home, even if it's not with us. Remember, everything I built for you." I closed the letter and leaned back against the wall. My heart felt like an old wound reopening. The next one was from a few years later. "I'm sorry for the way we argued. I never wanted you to think I didn't believe in you. I just didn't want you to forget where you came from. I wish I knew how to say these things out loud." I kept reading, one after another, each one a confession of love wrapped in regret. Every line sounded like a man trying to reach through time to touch the boy he once held in his arms. I never mailed them because I thought there would be a better moment, a right time to say it all. But the truth is, there's never a perfect time to say you're sorry. I didn't notice how much time had passed until the light in the attic began to dim. I sat there, surrounded by the past, feeling both full and empty at once. I picked up the last letter, the only one sealed. It had no date. The paper was newer, the ink darker. I must have written it after she died. I broke the seal and unfolded it slowly. My boy, if you ever read this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say it when I should have. I wasn't the best father. I was strict, stubborn, sometimes blind. I worked too much and loved in the only way I knew, by giving you what I never had. But I forgot that what you needed wasn't money or things. It was me. I hope someday you'll forgive me. And if you ever come back home, know that your chair will still be waiting by the fire. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. The attic felt alive, like the walls could hear my heart. When I came back downstairs, the world outside had already turned dark. The wind whispered through the cracks in the door, carrying the scent of snow. I sat by the fire, the letters spread out before me like pieces of a life unfinished. I wanted to call him. I wanted to tell him that I still kept everything, his toys, his drawings, even the first tie he gave me. I wanted to tell him that no matter what had happened, he was still my greatest pride. But I didn't call. Instead, I started writing again. This time not to keep the words hidden, but to find courage in them. Son, I wrote, I saw you last night, and I realized how far apart we've grown. But I also saw something in your eyes, a reflection of who you used to be. I don't blame you for the life you've built. I'm proud of you. I just hope you still remember where love used to live. The pen shook in my hand. My vision blurred. I stopped, unable to finish. For a moment, I looked at the fire, the flames rising and falling like breath, and I wondered if love could really fade, or if it only changes shape when people forget to feed it. And that's when I felt it, a strange urge to speak, not to him, but to whoever was out there listening to my story. Because I know I'm not the only one who's felt this silence, this distance. So before I go on, let me ask you something. From where are you listening to this story tonight? Maybe from a warm home, maybe from a quiet room like mine. Maybe you, too, have someone you love but don't know how to reach anymore. If you do, don't wait for the right time. Don't keep your words locked in a box like I did. The people you love deserve to hear it, not read it when it's too late. Because sometimes, the heaviest letters are the ones we never deliver. The next few days passed like fog, slow, shapeless, and heavy. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. They sat on the table like witnesses to a life I had never truly finished living. Every time I looked at them, I felt both proud and ashamed, proud because they were pieces of my heart, ashamed because I never had the courage to share them. That Saturday afternoon, I decided to drive to town. I told myself it was just to buy groceries, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I just needed to see him, my son. Maybe I'd stop by his office, maybe invite him for coffee, something simple. No expectations, just a few minutes together. The road was covered with frost, the trees bending gently under the weight of winter. The radio played old Christmas songs, the kind that sound sweet but hurt when you're alone. I parked a few blocks from his office and sat there for a while, watching people hurry by with their shopping bags and red scarves. When I finally walked in, the receptionist smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. I laughed softly. "No, I'm just his father." She hesitated, then made a quick call. A few minutes later, he came out. He looked surprised, maybe even uncomfortable. His voice was calm, professional. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I told him I was just in the area, thought I'd drop by. He glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting soon, but, sure, let's grab a coffee." We sat at a small cafe across the street. He talked about work, projects, deadlines. I nodded, pretending to follow. But my heart was somewhere else, in the past, in the attic, between the words I never said. At one point, I took a deep breath and said, "You've done well, son. Your mother would have been proud." He smiled politely, thanked me, and went back to stirring his coffee. There was a silence that followed, the kind that feels alive, like it's waiting for something to happen. And I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I found some letters," I said quietly. "Ones I wrote to you over the years." He looked up, confused. "Letters?" I nodded. "Yes. Things I should have said a long time ago. About us. About your mother. About how sorry I am for." He cut me off gently, his voice soft but distant. "Dad, you don't have to do this." "But I do," I said. "Because silence builds walls. And we've built too many." He leaned back, sighed. "I know I've been busy. It's not that I don't care." "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "But it's not about being busy. It's about forgetting that some people are still waiting for you, even when the world gives you everything else." He didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, he said something that struck deep. "Dad, sometimes I felt like you were never really there either. Not when I needed you." The words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He looked down, his hands tightening around the cup. "When Mom got sick," he continued, "you were always working. I used to wait for you by the door every night, just to tell you how she was doing. Sometimes you didn't come home until I was already asleep. I thought you didn't care." The air around us froze. I wanted to scream that I did care, that every hour I spent working was for them, for her treatments, for his future. But the truth was cruel, he was right. I had been there, but not really there. My body was in the house, but my heart was trapped in fear, fear of losing everything, fear of watching her fade. "I was trying to save her," I whispered. "I didn't know how to save you both." He looked at me then, really looked. For a moment, I saw something soften in his eyes, but it disappeared quickly. "We can't change it now," he said quietly. "What's done is done." The silence that followed was unbearable. The sound of cups clinking, people laughing, Christmas music playing, everything felt distant, unreal. When we left the cafe, the sky was already turning dark. Snow began to fall, gentle and slow. We stood outside for a moment, unsure of how to say goodbye. "Take care, Dad," he said, putting his hands in his pockets. "And, thanks for coming." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Always." He walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, watching, until he was gone. On the drive home, I couldn't stop hearing his words, "You were never really there." They echoed inside me like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. When I got home, I sat by the fire again. The letters were still there on the table, waiting. I picked one up, then put it down again. My hands were shaking. The truth of it all hit me at once, that love can fade not from anger, but from absence. That night, I opened a bottle of wine. I rarely drank, but I needed something to quiet the noise inside. I sat in the dim light, reading the letters over and over, and I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe my son's distance wasn't about money or pride. Maybe it was about pain I helped create without even knowing. As the fire burned low, I whispered the words I never said when she was alive, when he was small, when life still had room for second chances. "I'm sorry," I said aloud, to no one and everyone. For the nights I wasn't there. For the words I didn't say. For the man I tried to be, and the father I wasn't. The flames flickered softly, and for a second, I thought I saw her, my wife, sitting in her old chair, smiling at me through the smoke. Maybe it was just the wine. Maybe it was forgiveness. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was peace. A fragile peace, but still peace. And though I didn't know it then, that night marked the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, a turn in the story neither of us saw coming. The morning after that conversation, I woke up with the taste of regret still heavy in my mouth. The snow outside had stopped, but the world looked gray and quiet in that kind of way that feels more like absence than peace. I sat by the window for a long time, watching the branches sway under the weight of winter, and I thought about how pride was like that snow, soft when it falls, but heavy once it settles. I thought about the way my son looked at me at the cafe, the way his eyes had flickered between anger and sorrow. I realized that all these years, I'd been waiting for him to understand my sacrifices, when maybe I'd never tried to understand his wounds. Pride blinds you like that. It makes you think you're the one who's been wronged, when maybe you're the one who stopped reaching out first. That afternoon, I walked to the small church on the edge of town. It was old, wooden, and empty except for the faint smell of candles and the echo of hymns long gone. I used to go there with my wife every Christmas Eve. She'd light a candle and whisper a prayer, not for things, but for people. She used to say that the heart of Christmas wasn't in gifts or dinners, but in forgiveness. I never understood what she meant back then. I think I do now. I sat on the last bench, my hands clasped, the air cold against my face. "If you can hear me," I whispered, "I think I messed up. I tried to be strong, to do what I thought was right. But all I've done is build walls, between me and him, between me and her." My voice cracked. I don't want to leave this world with silence between us. I stayed there for a while, and when I left, I felt lighter, not free, but lighter, like something inside had started to melt. On the way home, I passed a small antique shop I hadn't noticed before. In the window, there was a music box, carved wood, with tiny angels painted on the lid. It looked just like the one my wife used to have, the one that played when our son was born. I went inside and asked the old woman behind the counter about it. "It's a rare one," she said, wiping the dust off gently. "Plays Silent Night. Still works, if you wind it slow." I turned the handle, and the melody filled the room, fragile, trembling, like the sound of memory itself. I felt a lump in my throat. "How much?" I asked. She named the price, more than I could afford. I thought about my wallet, about the bills waiting at home, but I didn't care. For once, I wanted to give something that carried meaning. Something that wasn't practical, or expensive, but real. I paid for it with the last of my savings. When I walked out, the cold bit at my face, but my heart felt warm. I held that music box close, imagining his expression when I gave it to him. Maybe it wouldn't fix everything, but maybe it would say what words never could. That night, I sat at my table and wrapped it carefully. I used old brown paper, tied with string, and slipped a note inside, for the nights we forgot how to listen to each other. "Love, Dad." Then, as I sat back, I noticed the tie, the gray one he'd given me, still draped over the chair. I picked it up and stared at it for a long moment. Then I smiled, tied it around my neck, and looked in the mirror. It didn't fit right, too tight, too neat for a man like me, but it didn't matter. For the first time, I felt like I could wear it without bitterness. The next morning, I decided to visit him again. I didn't call, I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted him to see that love didn't have to wait for invitations. The drive was long and quiet. The snow had begun to fall again, soft and steady, painting everything white. When I reached his house, I saw through the window that they were decorating their tree. Emily was hanging ornaments, and he was helping their little girl, my granddaughter, place the star on top. The sight made me stop. I hadn't realized how much she'd grown. For a moment, I thought about turning back. Maybe they didn't need me there. Maybe I'd only interrupt their happiness. But then, my granddaughter laughed, that small, ringing sound that carries innocence even the world can't spoil, and something inside me broke open. I stepped out of the car, holding the small package under my arm. The snow crunched beneath my boots. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a second, then knocked. Emily opened it, surprised but smiling. "Mr. Harris," she said softly. "What a surprise." I smiled awkwardly. "I was in the neighborhood," I lied. "Just wanted to drop something off." She called for him. He came, holding his daughter's hand. For a second, his face showed confusion, then something softer, maybe hesitation, maybe guilt. "Dad?" I nodded. "Just a little early gift." I handed him the box. "For you all." He looked at it, uncertain. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted. "Sometimes, we don't say enough. Sometimes, we give too late." I didn't want this to be one of those times. He took the box slowly, and for a moment, I saw something shift in his eyes, the boy I used to know flickering through the man he had become. I said goodbye quickly, before the weight in my chest turned into tears. As I walked back to the car, I heard the faint sound of the music box playing from inside, Silent Night, gentle and broken. The same melody that had played the day he was born. I sat in the car for a long time, the snow falling harder now, covering the windshield in white. I didn't start the engine right away. I just listened to the echo of that song in my heart, and I thought maybe forgiveness doesn't come in words. Maybe it comes in small moments, wrapped in brown paper and tied with trembling hands. Christmas Eve came slower that year, as if time itself was holding its breath. The air outside was sharp, filled with the kind of cold that bites the lungs, but inside my small house the fire burned softly, steady and calm. The music box I'd given him a week earlier still echoed in my mind. I didn't know if he liked it, if it meant anything to him. He hadn't called since. But I wasn't angry anymore. Maybe some gifts take longer to open, not the wrapping, but the heart around them. I spent the day preparing a small dinner. Just for me, though a part of me still set the table for two old habits never die. The house smelled like roasted chicken and pine wood. I lit a single candle, not for light, but for memory. I whispered a prayer for my wife, for my son, for the parts of us that still lived somewhere between silence and love. As night fell, I sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift past the lamplight. The world was quiet, peaceful, but not empty. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness hurts, solitude heals. I was beginning to learn that. Then, around 8, I heard it, a car pulling up outside. The engine cut off, and for a moment, I didn't move. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that hope was playing tricks on me. But then came the knock, soft, uncertain. When I opened the door, there he was. My son. Snow in his hair, ice-tired, hands in his pockets. Behind him, the glow of his car's headlights painted the falling snow gold. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Merry Christmas, Dad." I swallowed hard. "Merry Christmas, son. Come in before you freeze." He stepped inside, looking around like he was stepping into a memory he'd forgotten. "It hasn't changed," he said softly. "Not much reason to," I said with a small smile. "Some things shouldn't." He nodded. I brought something." He handed me a small box. Inside was the old paper tie, the one he'd made as a child, perfectly preserved in a new frame. My throat closed up. "I found it," he said quietly. "In Mom's chest. I thought you'd want it." I didn't trust myself to speak. My fingers traced the edges of the paper, the faded colors still bright in my memory. "She kept everything," I said. "I know," he answered. "And?" I saw the letters. "Emily found them when she went to help you last week. She told me." I froze, unsure what to say. "You read them?" He nodded. "Every one of them." His eyes shimmered. "Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know how much you carried." I looked away, ashamed, the candlelight flickering between us. "I never meant for you to see them," I whispered. "They were just things I couldn't say out loud." He stepped closer. "Then let me say this, now, I'm sorry too. For the distance. For that night with the tie. For all the times I tried to prove I wasn't you, when all I ever wanted was to be loved the way you loved Mom." My knees went weak, and I sank into the chair by the fire. He came beside me, and for the first time in years, we sat together, no walls, no silence, just the warmth of a room too small for bitterness. He looked around the house, eyes soft. "You know," he said, "after you gave me that music box, I played it for Lily every night. She asked where it came from, and I told her it used to belong to Grandma. She said it sounded like Christmas feels." I smiled. "She's right." We ate dinner together, nothing fancy, just food that tasted like home. He laughed when I spilled gravy on my shirt, and I laughed when he burned his tongue on the soup. It was clumsy, awkward, imperfect, and perfect all the same. After dinner, we sat quietly by the fire, the room filled with the soft crackle of wood and the low hum of peace. Then he said something that broke me and mended me all at once. "Dad, I want you to move in with us." I looked at him, startled. "What?" "I mean it. The house is big. Lily would love having her grandpa around. Emily already said yes." I didn't know what to say. My instinct was to refuse, pride again, that stubborn thing that never knows when to stop fighting. "I don't want to be a burden," I said. He shook his head. "You won't be. You'll be family. Like it's supposed to be." My eyes filled, the kind of tears that come not from sadness but from the slow unraveling of years of loneliness. I nodded, unable to speak. We stayed there until midnight. When the clock struck 12, the church bells from down the road began to ring, echoing through the snow-covered night. He looked at me and smiled, really smiled, the way he used to when he was little. "Merry Christmas, Dad," he said again. "Merry Christmas, son," I whispered. We hugged, a real hug this time, the kind that carries forgiveness in it. I could feel the years melt away, the cold leaving the corners of my heart. When he left that night, the snow had stopped. The sky was clear, the stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. I stood on the porch long after his car disappeared down the road, listening to the silence, not empty this time, but full of everything I thought I'd lost. And as I went back inside, the fire still glowing faintly, I thought of my wife. I imagined her smiling somewhere beyond the flickering light, whispering, "You did it, my love. You found him again." For the first time in years, I slept without dreams, just peace. But I didn't know then that this Christmas would be our last together. The days after that Christmas passed in a blur of quiet joy. My son called every morning, my granddaughter would shout through the phone, her laughter filling my small kitchen like sunlight. For the first time in years, I felt needed again. The loneliness that once wrapped itself around my shoulders like an old coat began to slip away. We planned that I would move in after New Year's. I started packing little by little old photos, my wife's cookbook, the music box the old lady sold me. I was ready. Ready for a new chapter. Ready to belong again. But life, I've learned, has its own way of reminding you that it's never ours to plan. It happened 3 days before New Year's Eve. I woke up with a strange pain in my chest, not sharp, just heavy. I thought it was the cold, maybe the flu. I made tea, sat by the fire, and told myself it would pass. But as the hours went on, the heaviness grew. Breathing became a little harder, like every inhale carried the weight of all the years I'd lived. I didn't want to call anyone. I didn't want to worry him. Pride, that same old friend that had ruined so much, kept whispering that it was nothing. But by evening, I knew something wasn't right. I tried to stand and reach for the phone, but my vision blurred. The room spun. I sat back down, pressing my hand against my chest. And for a moment, everything slowed, the ticking clock, the wind outside, even my thoughts. Then I heard something faint, music. Soft, trembling, familiar. The music box. I must have wound it by accident earlier. The tune filled the room, silent night. I closed my eyes and listened. And in that moment, it felt like my wife was there again, humming along, her hand resting on mine. I don't know how long I sat like that before the door opened. Through the haze, I heard voices, my son's, Emily's, even Lily's small laughter echoing faintly. They'd come earlier than planned, a surprise. I wanted to tell them how happy I was, but the words wouldn't come. My son rushed to my side, panic in his eyes. Dad! Dad, stay with me, okay? I tried to smile, but my body felt heavy, too heavy to hold on to. You came, I whispered. Of course we came, he said, gripping my hand. We were bringing dinner. We were going to spend the night. Just hold on, we'll call for help. I wanted to tell him not to. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that some goodbyes don't need saving. Instead, I looked at him, really looked, and saw everything I'd ever prayed for. A man with his mother's eyes, his own child's laughter, and my heart beating somewhere inside him. Don't be sad, I said softly. You came home. That's all I ever wanted. He shook his head, tears falling. No, you're staying with me. You promised. I smiled faintly. I did. And I will. Just, not in the way you think. His hand tightened around mine, his face blurring through the light. The last thing I heard before the world faded was the music box winding down, the last notes of Silent Night breaking softly in the air. When I opened my eyes again, everything was quiet, not silent, just peaceful. I saw light everywhere, warm and soft, like morning after snow. My wife was there, standing at the edge of it, her smile the same as the day I first met her. She reached out her hand and said, "It's time to go home." And in that moment, I understood, the miracle of Christmas isn't about life or death, gifts or grand gestures. It's about being found even after you're lost. They told me later, or maybe I just imagined hearing it, that my son stayed by my side all night, holding my hand, refusing to let go. That he found the letter I'd left on the table, the one I'd written days before. Son, if someday you find this, don't grieve too long. Remember, everything I did, even the mistakes, were because I loved you in the only way I knew. And if this is my last Christmas, then I'm grateful, because it brought you back to me. That's a miracle no money can buy. When they buried me, he played the music box beside the grave. The melody drifted through the cold air, soft and imperfect, like life itself. People cried, but I think he smiled through the tears, the kind of smile that understands that love doesn't end, it just changes address. From wherever I was, I saw him later that night, sitting by his tree, his daughter asleep in his arms. He told her a story, one she'll probably remember for the rest of her life. He said, once, there was a man who thought he'd lost his son. But on Christmas, he found him again. Not because of gifts or words, but because of something stronger. Because love, real love, doesn't fade. It waits. And then, softly, he told her, that man was my father. The lights on the tree flickered, the fire whispered, and the music box played one last time. And that was the miracle. A year passed after that Christmas, the Christmas that changed everything. My son never spoke much about that night. People say grief fades with time, but it doesn't. It just becomes quieter, softer, like a song you can still hear even when the radio's turned off. He moved back into the old house, our house. He said it felt wrong to sell it, that some places hold too much of who we were. So, he rebuilt it piece by piece, sanding the floors, fixing the roof, keeping the same crooked star on the Christmas tree. Emily painted the walls, and their daughter, Lily, filled every corner with laughter. The house that once felt too small for my life suddenly became big enough to hold 3 generations of love. Maybe that's how time redeems itself, not by erasing pain, but by teaching the next heart how to love better. Every December, he would play the music box by the fire. The melody was faint now, the gears slower, but he said it still sounded like me, imperfect, steady, familiar. Sometimes, when the room was quiet enough, he swore he could hear my voice humming along. Maybe he could. On Christmas Eve, he sat by the window, the same spot where I once watched the snow fall alone. Lily climbed onto his lap, holding the paper tie that now hung in its glass frame. "Daddy," she said softly, "was Grandpa really sad before he went to heaven?" He smiled through the ache that never quite left him. "Maybe a little," he said. "But not at the end." At the end, he was happy. She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because he remembered what Christmas really means," he said. He remembered that love isn't something you buy, it's something you give, even when no one's asking. Lily nodded, her little fingers tracing the edges of the frame. "I want to make you a tie too," she said. He laughed, a tear catching in his throat. "Then I guess I'll have to wear it every Christmas." That night, after everyone went to sleep, he walked outside. The snow had fallen thick, covering everything in white. The street was quiet, the air still. He looked up at the stars, the same sky that had watched me for so many years. And in that silence, something strange happened. The wind picked up gently, brushing against the pine trees, making the lights on the porch flicker. They made a faint sound, a hum, soft and rhythmic, almost musical. He smiled, because for a second, it felt like the lights were singing. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Dad." And somewhere, beyond the sound of the lights, I answered, "Merry Christmas, son." You see, the thing about love, real love, is that it doesn't disappear when life ends. It lingers in the little things, in the echo of a song, in a tie hanging by the door, in the laughter of a child who never even met you but somehow knows your heart. If I could tell you one last thing, if these words could reach through the screen to wherever you are listening from right now, it would be this: don't wait. Don't wait to forgive. Don't wait to call. Don't wait to say I love you. Because one day, the chair beside you might be empty. And you'll realize that the words you never said are the heaviest ones to carry. But if you're lucky, truly lucky, you'll learn what my son did, that love doesn't end with goodbye. It just finds new ways to speak. He still visits my grave every Christmas. He brings Lily with him, and they light a small candle by the headstone. He never cries, not anymore. He just talks. Tells me about work, about her school plays, about how he finally fixed the old pickup I left behind. He laughs sometimes, the same laugh he had as a boy, and I like to think that somewhere, I laugh with him. Then, when they're about to leave, he winds the music box one last time and sets it on the ground. The melody drifts through the air, fragile and slow, and he watches the light of the candle dance against the snow. It's a simple ritual, but in that moment, the whole world feels holy. Because Christmas was never about perfection, it was always about presence. About showing up, even when it hurts. About remembering that the smallest gifts, a letter, a tie, a music box, can hold the biggest meanings. The lights on the tree will fade, the snow will melt, the music box will stop one day. But the sound of the lights, that quiet hum of love that refuses to die, will keep echoing long after we're gone. So, wherever you are tonight, listening to this story, I want you to do one thing for me: look around. Look at the faces near you. Maybe they're not perfect, maybe they've hurt you, maybe you've hurt them too. But they're yours. They're your miracle. And if you still have the chance, forgive. Say what you need to say. Hold them close. Because love, my friend, is the only thing that outlives us all. And that, after everything, is the true sound of Christmas.